What's happening, ladies and gents of Fudge Muppet? It's Michael here today and welcome to the latest Skyrim build on the channel. Lately, there's been a lot of comments, tweets and Facebook messages asking for a vampire hunter, and we've listened and created this as a result. The vampire hunter is quite a holy looking build, and of course we'll be doing the Dawnguard DLC and siding with the Dawnguard. We've also gone with an Imperial for the race, and this is because of the backstory and because we wanted a human for this build. You also get pretty good race skill bonuses as well for the skills that we're using. The vampire hunter originates from Cyrodiil and grew up in a wealthy family who had kept the Order of the Virtuous Blood alive in the Imperial City. The Order of the Virtuous Blood had been around since the time of the Oblivion Crisis, and dedicated their faction to the extermination of vampires. That being said, however, the group weren't very good, and never had been. When the Order was first established, the group didn't even realize their own leader was a vampire, they weren't aware of vampire citizens living in the city, and rumor has it they accidentally let a vampire off the streets into their ranks. The Order, however, had still survived to this day, as many of its members were rich and used their wealth to make claims like, "We are responsible for the death of hundreds of vampires over many decades," simply because they had paid the rewards for them. The fact that the members were really incompetent was never spoken about. None of the members had really killed any vampires, but because they would pay rewards to mercenaries who did, the citizens of the Imperial City had no complaints. It seemed like the Order existed so that the rich members who just inherited their wealth would have some sort of identity in life and some sort of purpose. So the vampire hunter grew up with many family members in this group, but even he could see through their facade. He loved his family, but he hated fake people, and as he grew older, their delusional lifestyle frustrated him more and more. The vampire hunter really wanted archery lessons from members of the arena so he could one day hunt vampires, but his parents would not allow it. Because of this, he could only train in his room, using old books in the house to teach himself magic. He was also allowed to wear sets of armor which the Order owned, and so he would do so to become accustomed to how being kitted up felt. Eventually, however, as the vampire hunter grew old enough to make decisions for himself and also be in a peak physical state, he wrote his family a letter and left his house during the night. Over many days, he trekked to the lands of Skyrim, where he heard of a vampire hunting group called the Dawnguard. Arriving at the border, he is of course captured and taken to Helgen, where he later escapes. From here on, however, he decides that he should probably learn some skills before taking on monsters who may be centuries old, and so he uses a bow and arrows he finds and his knowledge of magic to train himself to be strong enough to join the Dawnguard. After joining the Dawnguard, the vampire hunter will continue his training to become a master with his bow, armor, and spells. Even after just running errands for Isran, he has no doubt in his mind that he has made the right decision. He will then dedicate his existence to eradicating vampires, and fulfilling the identity which was placed upon him by those who could never fully comprehend what it meant. The gear for the vampire hunter is the Dawnguard full helmet, Dawnguard heavy boots, Dawnguard heavy gauntlets, and the greyish variant of the Dawnguard heavy armor. Basically, you're wearing a full set of Dawnguard heavy armor. You'll also want Auriel's bow and sun-hallowed elven arrows. To make these arrows, you will need elven arrows, so collect these until you're able to transform them after getting the bow. Auriel's bow does 10 points of sun damage and makes undead targets take triple damage. The arrows cause sunburst attacks to nearby targets if shot at the sun. Also, in terms of a bow and armor, you'll use whatever you can find before joining the Dawnguard, which you will do as soon as you've trained yourself up to level 10. You will not get the bow, however, until towards the end. The skills then for the vampire hunter are archery, restoration, alteration, and heavy armor. With heavy armor, you're going to be having all the perks to make yourself extremely sturdy, maneuverable, and of course make the most out of your armor rating while in Dawnguard heavy armor. For archery, you will also have every single perk to make yourself the most masterful archer possible. You never want to miss a shot that makes the difference between surviving unscathed and having two fangs in your throat. As you can see, this build is a ranged tank build. You're also going to want Alteration for flesh spells like Ebony Flesh, which will protect you, and also the Atronach perk for 30% spell absorption. We're also not going to be using any magical resistance because whatever magicka hits us we want to absorb. On top of this, we're going to be using the Atronach Stone, which will give you 50 more points of Magicka, 50% spell absorption, and minus 50% Magicka regen. This is going to give you a total of 80% spell absorption, so you do not take much damage from the dark magic of vampires. Instead, you will absorb their magic, converting it to your own holy power when you use it to cast Stendarr's Aura. Stendarr's Aura does 10 damage for 60 seconds to undead targets in melee range and looks amazing too. Restoration will therefore be used to cast this spell and also to cast healing spells. You're also going to want the Necromage perk in the Restoration tree to affect undead more with your spells. We'll have a perk link for you in the description as usual to show you every perk you'll need for this build. In terms of a stat spread, the Vampire Hunter will be using 50% health to stay alive and go with the tanky theme of the build, 30% Magicka to cast your flesh spells, healing, and Stendarr's Aura, and 20% stamina to sprint and most importantly slow time and zoom with your bow. The playstyle for the Vampire Hunter is quite straightforward. You'll want to have Stendarr's Aura in one hand and Ebony Flesh in the other hand before battle. Cast the spells together and then pull out your bow. Remember that you won't need Stendarr's Aura against non-undead targets. After you whip out your bow, you're all good to go. That said, even though you're a heavy tank and can take hits, you'll often want to avoid damage from vampires so you don't contract their disease. Because of this, you'll want to have as much distance between you and them as possible. Well, a distance that makes it so you can still land your arrows. When fighting vampires outdoors, be sure to use your arrows to shoot the sun, which will then make it fire rays of light at your enemies. And that wraps up this week's Skyrim build, the Vampire Hunter. Thanks for watching, and please do click the subscribe button to support our channel and not miss a single Skyrim build in the future. Like the video if you love Skyrim, and remember that the perk link we've made can be found in the description box. I'm Michael from Fudge Muppet, this was our Vampire Hunter, and I'll see you soon ready to nerd out with some more Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and Star Wars.